We are live.
Okay, this is a conference committee for H534, the retail theft bill. We're here with 5 conferees and Senator Sears is remote. But I thought we would start with having Eric Fitzpatrick walk us through the differences and, on a high level, but it's short enough that we can dig right into the details, I guess.
Sure, will do. Thank you, Senator Baruth, and good afternoon, everybody. Eric Fitzpatrick with the Office of Legislative Counsel here, as the chair of the conference committee said, to explain the changes between the Senate and House versions of H534 activating to retail theft. Going sort of from the back to the front, just because there's no need to really focus on sections 3 and 4, which are pages 2, 3, and 4. The reason for that is those sections, while they were struck from the Senate version of the bill, they were actually put into a different bill. They were put into the House the corrections miscellaneous bill, and they passed in that bill. So although they aren't in this bill anymore, they nevertheless passed elsewhere. So this is the background information on those sections. So the real substantive difference.
They have passed out of both bodies?
I don't know if it's quite gotten there yet, but my understanding was that it was moving in that direction.
It's not fully passed yet.
No.
So I just feel like that's important to note because then it means those things are still in play then. So for us to just hold that.
Sure. So yes, that's the background on those corrections pieces. The first two sections really deal with both the House and Senate versions address the issue of what to do with multiple offenses of the retail theft offense, right? What happens when there's multiple misdemeanor offenses in particular? And remember that a misdemeanor retail theft is when it involves merchandise at $900 in value or less, right? So what to do in those situations? And the House and Senate took 2 different approaches. The House's approach was to say, all right, when there's more than one misdemeanor retail theft offense that took place at more than one location within a 14-day period in a single county, well, in that case, there would be a felony penalty that would apply. 10-year felony, $1,000 fine. So in a sense, the aggregate amount of property stolen could be added together if there was more than one offense within that 14-day period in a single county, and that would bump you up to the felony. Senate approach was different, but also addressing the same problem, which is the problem, as I said, of multiple misdemeanor retail thefts. And the Senate approach rather was to say, keep the idea of the misdemeanor based on the $900 less value, but a system of graduated penalties based on multiple offense. So in other words, the first time that you can commit the misdemeanor offense, the penalty would actually be a little bit less than it is in current law, actually quite a bit less. Rather than 6 months imprisonment, it would be 30 days. For a second offense, it would step up. In that case, the 6-month period, $1,000 fine would kick in. For a third offense, then you would move into the felony range. So that would be a $1,500 fine, 3 years in prison, which is a felony, because 2 years is the dividing line between misdemeanors and felonies. And then fourth or subsequent offense, you would hit that maximum penalty of 10 years imprisonment, $2,500 fine again. Obviously a serious thing. So it's basically 2 approaches at addressing the similar issue of multiple misdemeanor retail thefts and how do you address that.
Thank you, Eric. Any questions for Eric?
Not right now.
Pretty clear. So if y'all don't mind, I can start with why we didn't follow your approach, and maybe we've misunderstood it, or but a couple of years ago, I want to say 2 years ago, we took up a bill that was somewhat similar to this. So it aggregated offenses, and if you totaled over 900 because of that aggregate, then it stepped up penalties beyond the misdemeanor. Problem that we incurred was mostly Matt Valerio argued that it was unconstitutional in his opinion to be aggregating offenses, but he pointed out also some just practical things. So when I look at your language, I assume what this means is that a person who is convicted of one or more retail theft within a 14-day period. In other words, the fact that somebody is cited in multiple places, they're not yet convicted. So you would need to pursue both of those separately, it seems to me, and then you aggregate if there were two convictions. So in other words, let's say someone robbed a store of $700 in Burlington on a Monday, and then on the Wednesday, they robbed South Burlington. They're caught in both places. Both get sent to the district attorney or the state's attorney. Then it seems to me the only way you would be able to invoke this is if they were convicted on both charges. In which case, then is this an added penalty because you were found to have been convicted on both within a 14-day period? Or is your approach that if you're cited twice within a 14-day period? Because that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because you're innocent until proven guilty. So I don't know how you can, if you haven't been convicted of both, how can you be cited for having two within 14 days? Does that make sense?
It does. And,
Okay.
And so to respond, so what we are envisioning, what the House bill envisions, is actually aggregating them when someone has been cited for the offense, not after a conviction. With the idea being that if someone has the pending charges for retail theft over this 14-day period, they could be combined into this more serious charge, and the person has not been found guilty of anything by putting all these charges into the same bucket, but they would still need to be found guilty of the aggregate of charges.
Mm-hmm.
But by combining them, it's a means to show that someone is committing repeat offenses, albeit combined into one for the purpose of the court hearing, and that that would carry a greater penalty.
Can I add something? I just remember from testimony we heard too, because I think that was a piece of it, until proven guilty piece. But what we were hearing, I think it was from Tim even, is that there is an abundance of evidence a lot of time. Like there's camera footage, there's everything. So it is just a matter, like it's obvious this is it. Granted, you still want somebody to have to go through the judicial process, but that was what we were trying to do. It was like, evidence is clear. Can we put these things together to really hold somebody accountable for the full effect of what they're stealing?
So the way, I'm just trying to figure out the way it would work. So the two law enforcement agencies don't know about the other charge. So they each separately move a charge to the state's attorney, and then the state's attorney has to make the connection and determine that it was within a 14-day window.
So yeah, the aggregation would happen at the state's attorney's level, because that's where it does come together. And then that is one of the reasons why the bill, as we envisioned it, the offenses all had to happen in the same county, so that it was the same state's attorney who was handling the cases. But yes, so the aggregation would happen at state's attorney's levels. And I would just point out as well, as Representative Dolan mentioned, we were told a lot of times there's camera footage from stores, whatnot. It would be up to the state's attorney whether to combine the charges or not. So if you had someone with 4 retail thefts of the span of 10, 14 days, the state's attorney could look and say, well, we've got strong evidence for these 3 and they get us over the $900 threshold. We don't have to worry about this one where, say, there's no camera footage. So the ability to make a strong case rests with the state's attorney.
Okay, so then one last thing, and then I'll turn it over to you for your opinion on this. So what I'm wondering is, what we heard from witnesses is that the $900 limit was low enough and state's attorneys were reluctant enough that it wasn't enough in the current law to wind up getting charges moving through the system. So police weren't arresting, state's attorneys weren't prosecuting, etc. So if I'm understanding your proposal right, we would still be operating under current law in each of the 2 instances. So how does it help that problem? Because it's only at a later stage that the district attorney might make the connection. I think a 14-day window is a pretty narrow time for a district attorney to put two and two together and say, there are two different pending charges, but am I understanding it right that each of them would be happening under the current state of law, and it's only later that there would be an enhanced penalty if they were both prosecuted? Problem being that people are saying under current law they're not prosecuting, and this wouldn't change the current law for the two component prosecutions. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And, but one of the means to address this, and we heard from retail establishments. I manage a retail establishment in downtown Rutland. And one of the concerns is, yeah, these minor crimes are not always being prosecuted. But the idea being, if you had a means to combine, if you had a means to make them a more serious charge, then you might see more action and more remedy. And one thing that was pointed out to us when we took testimony and we heard from the Rutland County State's Attorney is that the Rutland region, Rutland City, Rutland Town saw a significant drop in retail theft. Sorry, slow your thunder. We saw a significant drop in retail theft because 5 individuals were all in the local jail going through the court system at the same time. And just having those 5 individuals off the streets made a huge difference in the day-to-day theft level we're seeing. So this doesn't need to be, this doesn't need to see widespread use to be success. It just needs to make it easier to prosecute and have higher penalties for a small number of bad actors, and it would have a significant improvement on the ground in many communities in the state.
And those 5 bad actors that he's talking about were hitting the threshold in a day, being caught and hitting the threshold. But they need the fixes that they need. Of course, they're going and stealing stuff and selling it and going and buying what they need to buy. And one other thing that happened, of course, getting them off the streets, the retail theft plummeted, but I'll call them their associates, people that they knew, also slowed down on their retail theft because they saw there was consequences.
And I totally get that. The piece I'm missing is how your approach makes it more likely that somebody will get prosecuted, given that the law enforcement agency involved doesn't know about the second. That's going to happen 5 days from now. So they don't know about it, and the state's attorney, I would argue, is not going to have time in 14 days to connect these dots.
But yeah, if I might add to that,
Yeah, go ahead.
the problem it has with the 14-day period, okay, one, this is a tracking nightmare, okay, for local law enforcement agencies, because if you're picked up for a minor or misdemeanor retail violation, the officers are going to have 6 to 8 weeks to file that paperwork, okay? State's attorney's not even going to see it. It's a misdemeanor. So by the time it gets over there, these people could continue to do this thing. So my concern is with the 14-day period. I can tell you from experience that a misdemeanor violation does not get over there until 6 to 8 weeks after the alleged offense occurred.
The charge doesn't need to be aggregated in 14 days after the initial charge. The 14 days is the time period from one charge to another that could be aggregated. And that doesn't necessarily have to happen immediately. That could happen in the process later. And the question I would have in regards to law enforcement and using it more is based on testimony that we heard, I think it'd be fairly clear to arresting officer, an officer who's responding, whether someone is new, some kid shoplifting, first time offender versus the regular people they see. I know from talking to members of the Rutland City Police Department that they know who the players are. They know who, when they're called to our main areas of retail theft offense, which for us is our downtown plaza where the Walmart and the Price Chopper are, that half the time they know who they're going to see. So the offenders who would fall under this, it would be very clear if this was enacted to law enforcement, like who is going to apply to that, because they're familiar with these actors.
And I agree with that, but
if I might.
Rutland, okay, this is
Yeah.
very rural. and the same doesn't apply.
Let me bring Senator Sears in. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, I think we're all on the same page. We're trying to solve a problem. But my issue with the proposal from the House is mainly that things that both Senator Bruce and Senator Norris brought up. But also, I live in Bennington. We have a lot of theft, quite frankly, between Manchester and Rutland. People go to Rutland, steal from your stores, go down to Manchester, steal from those stores. And that wouldn't count. So that's like a different criminal justice system by having it in the same county. That's problem number one. Problem number two is I do believe it is unconstitutional, it will certainly be challenged the first case that comes forward. The Defender General's office made that clear. And the other issue I would raise is your proposal doesn't take into account what if it was $200 and it's pre-charged, and the next one is $700. So you haven't got to the 900 because they've already been diverted. And I do want to, I'm very happy that Rutland was able to lower the theft by putting people in jail. But most cases are misdemeanors. Both would be misdemeanors. And so they probably would not have any jail time. So they'd be out for whenever it all resolves. So those are my comments.
Okay, great. In the time we have left, maybe you could tell us what about our approach puts you off and why you don't think it's workable, and then we'll have an even playing field.
Yeah.
Certainly. And, I'll just speak first, and say that our concern is by not aggregating the offenses, by just going on a sort of 1, 2, 3 basis, that someone could end up with a very serious penalty for what could, in and of itself, be a very minor offense without tying it to, say, this $900 threshold.
Mm-hmm.
Theoretically, someone could do a very small theft under $20, under $10. But if they're caught doing it just a handful of times, then the penalty seems overly severe.
Mm-hmm. Fair point.
I think that is the piece I'm just hearing from community members as well, specifically thinking about youth that could fall into this, and that it's very broad. It could affect a lot of people, where I think our goal was to really target the repeat offenders that are stealing from establishments regularly and stealing just under that $900 threshold, and wanting to be able to say, no, you can't skirt around the law that way. If you keep doing this, it's going to add up, and we're going to hold you at the felony level.
Just a question for my own curiosity, because I had a question on the floor like that, stealing a bottle of soda or something like that. If it were a range, so it had to be over, let's say, $250, but under $900, would something like that help in terms of accepting that approach? So then you'd know that somebody was stealing a substantial amount of goods multiple times. There are some people who think that felonies at all for shoplifting should never occur. That's not the approach we're taking, but just wondering if there's a way to make the threshold range acceptable to you. Food for thought. Food for thought.
Yeah. And that's not the approach we're taking either, because obviously we're combining into a felony.
Yeah.
So I do find the idea that if there was a amount to ensure that it's not can of soda type thing, that it was someone who was a serious criminal actor. That's definitely food for thought.
Could I maybe add another piece for food for thought?
Sure.
I think it's also considering the time span too, because I could see a youth, again, even the 200 of it, whatever they could rack it up as a youth, and then say, something happens down the road, they make a mistake and have that fourth one, now it's a felony. And I just want to say, like, again, if we're really trying to get these repeat offenders that are doing it on a regular intentional basis, that's who I think we're trying to look at, not somebody who had the spree, fixed, I mean, maybe had a relapse or something, I don't.
So maybe within a 3 or 5 year period or something.
Again, food for thought to think about.
Okay, great.
Oh, one more thing. Senator Suda, just wanted to address one thing you said, around the, keeping it to the single counties. The main reason for that was, the potential logistics nightmare.
In this. Yes, I did. I think, I understand why you kept it in the Sanger County. I don't think you could coordinate between state's attorneys, but it does leave you with some disparity in what would happen. Another alternative in our construct might be to put a $100 or $200 limit on what would be counted towards
A floor.
a floor, what would be counted towards so it wouldn't be the lady who walks into Price Chopper and steals £1.50 of hamburger because she's starving.
Right.
At the price of a hamburger nowadays, it could reach the threshold.
Well, I understand that.
Yeah, the $200 floor as the offenses reoccur would get us close to the $900 amount we were going on this side, and something like a 5-year time limit so that someone didn't have like one.
Just scan it to that.
I think that sounds like we're honing in on something we could all agree on.
So let me ask, since we're running up on time for your other conference committee, would you prefer to put together a proposal to bring to us or vice versa?
We could come up with one.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
All right, why don't I have, who would schedule for you guys? Ashley will do it for us. Who should she be in touch with?
She can just reach out to me.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So we'll put together as soon as we can. Well, would you want to do it later today or early tomorrow morning?
I think either way is fine.
I could do it early tomorrow morning easier,
Right.
because I don't know when we'll be
Well,
off.
judiciary's meeting at 9 tomorrow morning. We should be done by 9:30 at the latest.
We're on the floor at 10. What about 8:30, Dick, for this?
That could work for me. I may not be fully dressed.
Well, we would prefer fully.
Let's do later then.
Keep that camera right on that.
No, I'm fine. I'm joking.
So does 8:30 work for you? Bob?
I guess I just thought I got a caucus at 8, but from the other parties.
But then you can leave
so.
caucus at 8:30. Beautiful.
Yeah, come over here, great.
Okay, so we could see you here at 8:30 and.
Perfect.
Great.
Can I ask a question before we disperse here? I don't understand the 14-day period. More than one retail theft within a 14-day period. So if it doesn't accumulate up to the aggregate you're looking for, and the 14 days has gone by, and they start all over again on day 15, 16, or 17, how does that affect your proposal here? Can you explain that to me? Or?
The 14 can shift.
We gotta go.
Oh,
you're.
I'm here.
So that 14 days can shift. It doesn't have to be like your first arrest.